Hi, it's Peter Schweizer, and welcome to the Drill Down. Well, the NFL season has kicked off, but are the most important tackles and the most important receptions taking place in Washington, D.C., rather than on the NFL football field? And is the wokeness that the NFL has embraced actually camouflage for something far more sinister? We're going to talk about sports. We're going to talk about the crony side of the NFL, and we're going to do that, of course, with the co-host of this program, Eric Eggers. Eric, it should be pointed out, you wrote a book, of course, on voter fraud, and you talk a lot about policy issues, but you have a background in sports. You were in sports broadcasting. Your wife teaches sports management at Florida State University, so you've tracked this stuff for years.
More importantly, I'm incredibly athletic, and I think that's what equips me today to just really kind of lock in and guide people through this discussion. Yeah,
I'm sure that's exactly it. So the NFL started. We all love football, but there is this side to it that a lot of people don't consider. And what we want to talk about today is the unseemly side of the NFL. You could argue that one of the most important signings in the NFL is not any player on the field. It's actually a player in Washington, D.C. We're going to talk about the NFL's lobbying activities, and we're going to look also at this issue of wokeness. They embraced it. There was the kneeling by Colin Kaepernick. There was his denunciation of systematic racism. The NFL's gone all in. We're going to talk about those signs in the end zones, but are they actually doing that to camouflage something that they are doing that is deeply, deeply damaging to a lot of Americans, including the black community? We're going to talk about that in detail today.
No, there's a lot of really interesting subplots to this, because most people just see, hey, the National Football League season has kicked off. It's the most dominant by far professional sports league in this country, and many people celebrate its return. I like watching football. I know that you like watching football as well, but it's an interesting time because, when we had a chance to fill in for Sean Handy a couple weeks ago, we were going to have a guest talk about the football and the NFL, and we were told, well, just so you know, NFL is very controversial right now because they're mandating one of 4 social justice themed messages in the end zones. You have to, for these NFL teams, they have to either pick end racism, choose love, stop hate, or inspire change. And by the way, it should be noted out that the NFL in every international game is putting the phrase end racism. So the NFL continues to promote the social justice messaging. And it's interesting when you consider that, hey, because a lot of these wealthy owners, they actually took the end racism message out of the Super Bowl end zone, I think partly because of Donald Trump, and a lot of these owners are friends with Donald Trump, yet most of these teams exist in blue cities, so there's that dynamic to it. But then you have to consider, what's the biggest thing? You talk about the biggest player and the biggest play for the NFL. The NFL has pending business before the Trump administration.
They do.
They're attempting to merge with Disney, and this merger, which would give the NFL, I think, a 10% equity stake in ESPN, which is owned by Disney, can be reviewed by the Department of Justice for up to a year.
Yeah, it's going to be a very, very interesting move. There are a lot of concerns that it's going to dominate and sort of lock up sports broadcasting for the most valuable franchise, the NFL. And in order to get this deal over the goal line, I'm sorry, there's going to be a lot of
I was about to say, I'm
analogies.
about to throw flags for too many sports metaphors in the podcast. We're already there.
We're only a couple minutes in, bro.
He's so excited, people. He's so excited. He's got more.
Well, the NFL has signed a new player. No, they actually signed up a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., a Ballard Partners, Brian Ballard, who is the founder of that. He was a finance chair for Donald Trump. The NFL's retained Ballard Partners and a guy that worked for Mitch McConnell, the former Senate leader, Republican from Kentucky. They have also signed on the chiefs of staff and tax counsel who used to work for John Thune, who's a Republican majority leader in the U.S. Senate. And this is all around issues, including tax lobbying that they're engaged in. So you've got the issue of the Disney merger, that they want to make sure that that goes through, that there's no anti-competitive resistance there. But they've also got tax lobbying. There's a lot of activity going on in Washington, D.C., where they're trying to get carve-outs, they're trying to get favors, and they're trying to get beneficial policies for themselves.
Yeah, in there, because, of course, Brian Ballard, his law firm is very pleased and proud of the work they're doing on behalf of the NFL. So in their release about it, they noted that in addition to working on regulation of sports betting,
Yep.
broadcast policy, and antitrust. Now, that's the issue in front of the DOJ. Now, it's worth pointing out that, that's the concern with the merger with Disney is antitrust concern. So that's why it's got to be approved. And so, Ballard Partners is an interesting figure when you consider that chief of staff, remember, to Donald Trump, Susie Wiles, actually at one point ran Brian Ballard's office in Ponte Vedra in the Jacksonville area with former NFL Hall of Famer Tony Baselli.
By the way, I want to emphasize that you shared this with me earlier, and it's kind of shocking. Has there ever been an NFL player that was an all-pro and then retired and became a lobbyist?
I'm sure there's probably a few, yeah. I'm not saying they're lawyers. I'm just saying they probably are useful in certain rooms.
Yeah, right.
And then, oh, by the way, remember also that the person who will ultimately have to kind of oversee and approve this deal is Attorney General Pam Bondi in her Justice Department. Pam Bondi also used to work for Ballard Partners, and so
I'm looking at that. I mean, she's got to recuse herself, right? I mean, this is the firm is being represented by her former employer. To me, that's a conflict of interest. I'm assuming she's going to have to say that she's going to recuse herself from involvement in this decision. At least she should.
Well, I think that's. I have yet to see that released from the Attorney General's office, but we'll pay attention to it. But it's not just this. You noted there's some other interesting things. The whole regulation of sports ownership and sports teams is fascinating. One of the things that sports owners are always concerned about is they get to write off as deductible depreciation in intangible assets. Mm-hmm. So like if their teams or their media contracts lose value over time, that's something they're allowed to declare. And by the way, that happened because it was signed into law under George W. Bush, who remember, former owner of the Texas Rangers. So there's an interesting relationship with, the presidency and sports leagues. Remember, Donald Trump himself used to own a team in the USFL.
Right.
And his whole strategy for trying to beat the NFL was he sued the NFL. And then they were only awarded $3 in damages, and so the USFL basically folded after that. Those are among the interesting dynamics, and that's kind of what put this on our radar. Is like, well, hey, the NFL's kicking off, and people are upset that ESPN now is in charge of this NFL Red Zone network, and what used to be commercial free, ESPN's now going to throw commercials in there. They're going to charge more money, so that doesn't seem great for consumers. But then it's another aspect of this ESPN relationship that kind of caught our eye more the more we looked into it, because, the antitrust stuff is interesting. The lobbyist piece of it's interesting. But what's really interesting is, it's impossible to watch a football game without noticing a certain trend in the advertising. You see one type of advertising pop up more and more.
Sports gambling.
Yeah.
Sports gambling. And this is the issue that's on the horizon. By the way, as we're going to talk about in a minute, this is the reason I believe the NFL embraced the woke agenda, because they have embraced the gambling industry. You mentioned earlier they used to resist it all the time. Now they're all in, and it disproportionately wreaks havoc on the black community. So to me, it's kind of this cheap way of them trying to camouflage the damage they're being done. But sports betting is the issue, and this Disney desire to merger with the NFL includes the fact that ESPN, which is owned by Disney, that is the center part of this deal, actually has its own gambling app, right? They have their own sports book. So that leads me to a question for you. Mm-hmm. Disney is now in the gambling business as a result of this. It's only going to grow. Which of the Disney characters do you think would be most likely to develop a gambling addiction? Goofy or Minnie Mouse?
So I think you're actually asking the wrong question.
Okay.
The real question is, which Disney character doesn't have a gambling problem? Because if you think about it, they all struggle with issues of impulse control. Winnie the Pooh, major honey problem, right? Yeah, Snow White can't stay away from poison and the apples. Cinderella cuts herself. I'm not sorry. I mean, Sleeping Beauty. So, it's they really, Michael Eisner should have hired Nancy Reagan and just told all these people to just say no in the 80s.
Yeah.
We'd have a very different culture today. No, but I do think that that's again, that's a sea change.
Yeah.
Because we live in Florida. Disney's a dominant cultural influence in Florida. The Florida Chamber of Commerce for years fought the expansion of gambling because Disney didn't want it. They thought it was bad for Florida's image as a family-friendly state. And so now just consider, since the Supreme Court decision in 2018, which has allowed states to choose to legalize sports betting if they so choose to do so, the NFL went from saying, we don't think that this is going to be a thing. Like there was a New York Times article in September of 2019 says that, we've got great engagement. We don't need to integrate sports betting directly into that. The NFL has had deals with their broadcasters that prevent them from even talking about gambling. And then you see the dramatic shift in terms of what's happened now, the way they embrace it. The NFL has lobbied on behalf of certain states, including Maryland, to help legalize sports betting. They now have casinos open in stadiums.
Yeah,
and so
insane.
for Disney to be a participant in that, I think is quite shocking, and it's just worth noting how quickly it's changed in 6 years.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, by the way, it used to be they completely avoided Las Vegas. There's now an NFL team in Las Vegas. The Raiders moved there, and the Super Bowl was in Las Vegas. So they have embraced it fully, and the amount of money that the NFL is making by the movement to gambling is amazing. You've got the
so why did they shift? Why the
Yeah, it's just the love of the game. It's just the love of the game. No, just the advertising during games. For example, DraftKings spent an estimated $36 million on gambling ads. FanDuel $27 million, BetMGM $11.5 million. But those are just small in comparison to the larger numbers, and that is this estimate that has been put out that. By the Gaming Association, which is the gambling industry, that the NFL is going to make $2.3 billion, their estimate per year, just from this hookup with gambling. Because it's not just that the bets are taking place. It's not just that now they're going to have this connection with ESPN and have the app. They actually sell player data and information, team data, to the gambling entities. So there are multiple streams of revenue that they are gaining by doing this. It's enormously profitable for the NFL. And of course, nobody's looking out for the fan. Nobody's looking out for what the consequences of this might be.
So a thing that we always say on this podcast, and listen, if you're watching the video, I wore a red tie just to be ironic as a Republican teetotaler, oh, gambling, tisk, tisk. But I do think, and it's not about that. Lots of people gamble responsibly. I've been known to participate in it. I may or may not have had the Vikings -1.5 last night. Okay, so it's like no judgment. But one of the things that we always talk about is how technology evolves so much more quickly and it impacts society so much more quickly than the legislation that's meant to keep up with it. Right. So I think we have to kind of just take a step back and say, what's happening right now? So this thing just became legal in 2018. And in that time, you just mentioned, it's $130 billion is being bet across all the different states. And that's $1.3 billion in tax revenue for those states. So they're certainly not complaining. The NFL is getting a lot of money from it. And the one thing that has been introduced potentially to help curtail it, so it's the NFL is making money off of this. The states are making money off of this. The casinos are clearly making up money off of this. ESPN, ironically, is not making money off of it because their app has got such a small portion of market share. But that's where this merger matters so much because they're it's run by a company called Penn Entertainment, and they've put out releases that say that they think this year will be the year that their market share increases dramatically because they're going to work in gambling into the ESPN fantasy football app. So it becomes especially predatory when you consider some stats about which populations are impacted as you're about to share.
Yeah.
But all that to say is that there is legislation that's been introduced, and it's called the Supporting Affordability and Fairness with Every Bet Act, or the Safe Bet Act. One of the things it would do would be prohibit sportsbook advertising from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. during live sports broadcasts, and it would also ban on individual college athletes and in-game wagers on professional or college sports. Now, that seems like potentially a reasonable thing to do. Who do you think is going to be opposed to that?
Yeah, the NFL, the casinos, the NFL owners, because everybody profits and benefits from this. That's what I think is so outrageous about it. And here's what's important about the dates you mentioned. You had the Supreme Court decision in 2018, right, that said gambling was legal. That corresponds, that dating and the fact that the NFL starts to embrace gambling corresponds almost precisely to when the NFL started to embrace the sort of woke fight racism agenda. Now, call me cynical, but here's the part that to me is really disgusting about what the NFL has done is they've embraced gambling. They've said, oh, we want to help, disparate communities that have been impacted by systematic racism in America. What are the communities that are most damaged by legalized gambling. It's the communities that they claim that they're standing up for. So just to give a couple of examples, numerous studies show that there's a much higher prevalence of problem gambling among young black adults than there are in any other community. There was a study in Ohio in 2022 that found that 32% of black residents who bet on sports met the criteria for having gambling problems. That compared to only 18% of white bettors. National surveys, the National Epidemiological Survey of Alcohol and Related Conditions, found that black adults had pathologies related to gambling that were double those of whites. A 2023 NCAA survey found that young black adults bet on sports at a much higher rate, 68%, than their white peers. So the problem that I have is for all of this phoniness about we care about this community, they don't care about this community. They're profiting off of this community. And by the way, look at the commercials, all these betting app commercials. Who do they have pushing this product? They know the communities they are targeting by doing this, and that's where they're making their money. By the way, I want to add Al Sharpton, the guy who's always supposedly standing up for his community. He's actually involved with gambling companies. He wants to get a cut of this action. And of course, Colin Kaepernick, who set off a lot of the wokeness in the NFL. For all his criticisms of systematic racism and everything else, he has had nothing to say about gambling.
That's an important point, but I also want to make this important point. As maybe one of the only podcasts in the world that's not sponsored by FanDuel or Sport, or DraftKings, we're open to that. And
no, we're not.
If needed to target certain demographics, I will code switch. So, we don't have to rule it out. No, it is amazing when you look at the forces at work, and you're right. The NFL leads with, hey, that's where to me the social justice and the end racism thing really
it's just
stands.
Bogus.
Aristotle said, I think it's a sign of enlightened mind if you can hold two conflicting thoughts at the same time. But these are two conflicting thoughts. The NFL is selling you this social justice. We want to end racism. At the same time, they're also selling a product that disproportionately impacts that community they're trying to stand up for. And that is just a reality of where the NFL is today. That did not used to be the case. That is something that has changed over the 7 years, and it's because of billions of dollars, and there's no sign of it slowing down. And the fact that they are staffing up with very connected lobbyists like Ballard Partners. And we've done podcasts about Ballard Partners before. These are people, they represented Harvard. They've represented foreign governments.
Democratic Republic of Congo, which is a sketchy government.
So unclear what their casino does in terms of the NFL. But yeah, so they have a very connected legal representation who says they're going to be lobbying on sports betting issues.
Yeah.
And so the NFL doesn't seem incentivized to see this slow down anytime soon. And so therefore and you remember, Donald Trump also has himself been in the casino business.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to consider what all the dynamics are, what all the moving pieces are. There is legislation that would curtail the promotion, which you could consider to be predatory if you consider the impacts to be severe in these communities. So it's just interesting to think about where will all these forces end up, and will anybody have a serious and substantive conversation about it? Probably not on ESPN, which again, they will actively promote their betting app.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing. I'm not really a gambler. I never have been. I don't think gambling should be outlawed. I think adults should be able to make their own choices. But here's the problem that I have with it. It's one thing if you have a casino. You choose to get in your car or get on a plane, fly somewhere or drive somewhere. You choose to go and gamble. There are a whole bunch of choices that you're making to do that. What this is happening is the NFL now, ESPN certainly, they're putting it in your face.
Yeah.
They're putting it in the face of young people. They're putting it in the face of people who maybe are trying to avoid it. It's like going to an alcoholic and showing up their door with a bottle of vodka and saying, "Are you interested?" You're in a sense cornering them, and that's the problem that I have with this. It's not a question of whether gambling should be legal. If you want to have a casino somewhere, that's fine. If you want to go and gamble there, that's fine. I don't think we should restrict that. But the notion that you are going to put this over our airwaves, you're going to create these apps, you're going to use these celebrities, you're going to target certain communities with this advertising because you know the proclivities for addiction to gambling. is just completely outrageous. And that's where they really need to be called into account.
The phrase that was used in some of the studies about the rise of sports gambling and its impact on not just African-American men, but young men in particular. And again, like the societal cost is real. They're saying that you've got bankruptcies are 25 to 30% higher in states that allow gambling than states that don't. You're seeing people invest 14% less because of the sports gambling drain. I mean, those are real tasks, but the phrase was a loaded syringe in your pocket.
Yeah.
Because it is a drug that you have access to at all times. And again, not saying it, whatever the regulatory conversation that should be had is, but here are some reasons why you might not have an honest or full-throated conversation about it, because you've got lots of very powerful interests who are currently making up money off of the status quo and aren't incentivized to see it changed.
Yeah, I will note that the NFL says that they are committing millions of dollars every year to organizations fighting gambling.
In fact, when they announced when they announced their partnership, the first of 4 with different different casinos, and so like in April of 21, they announced their first ever sportsbook partnerships with Caesars Entertainment, DraftKings, and FanDuel. And then 4 months later, they announced that to reach agreements with Fox Bet, BetMGM, PointsBet, and WynnBet to become approved sportsbook operators. They also did donate $6 million to study the long-term effects of gambling. Yeah. But remember, I mean, it's crazy. This is not the first time the NFL has been associated with a public health or public safety concern. Remember concussions and CTE, and you had that kind of went away fairly quickly. So it's the NFL doesn't mess around. The NFL doesn't like negative publicity, and Donald Trump, ironically, has been one of the few to elevate issues to cast negative lights on the NFL at times. It'll just be interesting to see where this conversation goes.
Yeah. By the way, one last thought on this. I don't know how they get away with these gambling app advertisements they run, where literally if you gamble just $5, they will give you $200 credit. Mm-hmm. To gamble more. I mean, is that not a invitation? Is that not, they've done the research and they know if they do that, if they send you $200, they're going to make bucket loads more after that because you are hooked. Am I missing something there?
No, I think that's kind of the point. Yeah.
Yeah. Just they should own it then. They should just own it and say it and not wrap it with a mantle of all the other crap that they're giving us.
I don't disagree. But the mantle they are giving it to us is in the most popular sports league in the country, and it presents as a potentially very significant issue. I think it's very early days on what the actual societal costs are, and I think it's only going to get worse, unfortunately.
Yeah, so final question for you. Has all of this, learning about this sort of unseemly underbelly of the NFL, realizing what they're doing with the gambling and how they're manipulating all these things, has it affected your love for the game? Do you watch the game differently, or do you watch it less than you used to?
Well, I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, so I'm already dead inside. So, yeah, that's like the joy has been gone for some time. Now it's much more clinical observation.
Good. Well, it's affected it with me, unfortunately. I love the NFL. I'm from Seattle. I'm a Seahawks fan, but I don't watch it as much as I used to anymore. And anyway, I imagine other people have probably had a similar experience.
And I'll just say the last thing, like the real thing, the NFL is one thing, but what happens in college is a really big deal because people bet on these games, and they bet on these kids, and then you see a lot of online bullying. Yeah, and these are young adults, and so I think this is one of a number of issues that we have yet to fully address. And again, that's why it's important to pay attention to the incentives and the people in the room helping to shape those conversations.
Well, we appreciate you as always taking the time to listen to this podcast. You've been listening to me, Peter Schweizer, and the apparently very athletic Eric Eggers.
I read The Athletic.
You can read more about the work we do at thedrilldown.com, and we ask that you please subscribe to this podcast. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.